The Waterfall Between Worlds, a Cowboy and the Apache. The sun was beginning to dip behind the rugged cliffs of the American Southwest, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and deep purple. Eli McGraw, a lean cowboy with weathered skin and eyes that had seen too much, his horse, a sturdy chestnut mare named Daisy, moved steadily under him, stepping carefully over rocks and through narrow paths that few people ever traveled. Eli had been riding for days, following the traces of his lost herd. Cattle rustling had become common in this part of the frontier, and he knew he had to find his herd before the night fell or risk losing everything he had worked for. Eli's life had always been one of wandering. He had no family waiting for him in any town, no permanent home, just the open land and the constant search for work and survival. He had seen harsh winters, blazing summers, and dangerous men who were ready to steal anything that wasn't tied down. But he had also learned to read the land, the way the wind whispered through the canyons, how the tracks of animals could tell stories of their movement, and how the sun's position could guide him even when the trails disappeared. As Eli rode, he noticed something unusual in the distance, a plume of smoke curling up from behind a set of jagged cliffs. Smoke was not uncommon in these parts. Cowboys, travelers, and settlers often lit fires to cook food or keep warm. But there was something different about this smoke. It was too steady, too controlled, and it came from a place that seemed hidden, almost like it was guarding a secret. Eli's curiosity, which he had learned to trust as much as his instincts, nudged him closer. He guided Daisy along a narrow path that led to a hidden canyon. The walls of the canyon were high, carved by centuries of wind and water, and the trail was barely visible under the loose stones. As he descended, he began to hear voices, soft, cautious, but unmistakably human. He slowed Daisy to a gentle walk, keeping low and trying not to draw attention. Peering through the rocks, he saw a small village nestled in the canyon, almost invisible to anyone who didn't know the secret path. Huts made of earth and wood blended seamlessly with the cliffs, and children played near the edge of a clear stream, their laughter floating through the air like music. Eli had heard stories about Apache villages from other cowboys, mostly rumors and warnings. Many said the Apaches were fierce warriors, protecting their lands from anyone who tried to intrude. But what he saw before him was not a place of war. It was a community, a living, breathing village where people laughed, worked, and cared for each other. Despite the tales he had been told, Eli felt a strange pull toward this hidden world. He approached cautiously, raising a hand to show he meant no harm. The voices fell silent immediately. People appeared at the edges of the village, their eyes sharp and wary. Among them was a young warrior named Tahlequah. He stood taller than most, his posture straight and confident, and his dark eyes were full of both caution and curiosity. Tahlequah had grown up hearing stories about cowboys, some of them cruel, some of them indifferent, but very few friendly. Seeing Eli, a lone stranger, he felt a mix of suspicion and a strange fascination. Eli dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. "I don't mean any trouble," he said in a low, calm voice. "I'm just looking for my cattle. I won't harm anyone here." His voice was steady, but inside he felt the familiar tension of being a stranger in an unknown place. Tahlequah stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of a small knife at his belt, not in threat, but in readiness. "Why should we believe you?" he asked, his voice firm but not unkind. "Strangers do not come to our village without reason." Eli nodded, understanding the caution. "I've lived my life on the trails. I know danger. I know what it's like to lose everything."
"I'm not here to fight. I just..."
"Need help, or at least a place to rest for the night." For a long moment they stood in silence, studying each other. The sun was now low in the sky, casting long shadows across the village. Children had stopped playing, and the adults watched from behind the huts, curious but cautious. There was a tension in the air, a delicate balance between trust and suspicion. Finally, Tahlequah spoke. "You may stay near the edge of the village, but we will watch. One wrong move, and you will regret it." His tone was firm, yet there was a hint of understanding. Eli accepted this silently, grateful for even a small measure of trust. He led Daisy to a shaded area near a rock outcropping and began to settle for the evening. As he worked, he noticed the village was unlike any he had imagined. Smoke rose gently from small fires where food was cooking, and the scent of herbs and roasted meat filled the air. Women tended to gardens and children ran barefoot across the rocks, laughing despite the cautious eyes of their elders. It was a place of life, hidden away from the dangers of the outside world. Later, as twilight settled over the canyon, Eli sat quietly by a small stream, letting Daisy drink and graze. He reflected on how strange life could be. He had been chasing his herd all day, expecting only dust and heat, and yet he had stumbled upon a hidden world, a community thriving in the harshest of lands. He wondered what stories these people carried, what hardships they had endured, and what dreams they held beneath the weight of their history. Meanwhile, Tahlequah observed him from a distance. He was not sure why he felt compelled to watch this cowboy. Perhaps it was curiosity, perhaps caution, perhaps something deeper he did not yet understand. The canyon seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that something important was unfolding. That night, a gentle wind swept through the canyon, carrying the sounds of distant water and rustling leaves. Eli lay on the ground under a simple blanket, listening to the quiet life of the village around him. For the first time in many days, he felt a small sense of peace. He did not fully trust this place, nor did he expect complete acceptance, but he understood that survival often required patience, observation, and respect. Tahlequah, lying awake in his own hut, thought about the cowboy. He had seen many strangers in his life, most of them passing through, some of them dangerous. Yet Eli seemed different. There was a calmness to him, a certain honesty in his presence that Tahlequah could not ignore. He resolved to learn more before making any judgments, understanding that the land, like people, often held surprises. By morning, Eli had already begun to observe the routines of the village. He helped gather water from the stream, repaired a fence with some of the villagers, and learned the names of a few people. Each small interaction was a lesson in trust, how to move carefully, how to speak with respect, and how to show that he was not a threat. Tahlequah watched from the shadows, noting each gesture, each smile, and each small act of cooperation. Over the next few days, Eli's presence became less of a curiosity and more of a quiet acceptance. The villagers still maintained their distance, but they began to treat him as a respectful guest rather than a potential enemy. And through it all, Tahlequah remained cautious, yet intrigued. He found himself observing Eli's work ethic, his careful attention to the land, and the quiet way he handled both people and animals. Slowly, an unspoken connection began to grow between the cowboy and the young warrior. A bond not yet of friendship, but of mutual recognition and understanding. Eli had learned long ago that the frontier was full of danger, but it was also full of beauty. In this hidden village he saw both: the harsh cliffs, the dry desert air, the ever-present struggle for survival, and yet also the laughter of children, the warmth of shared food, and the care people had for one another. He realized that trust and respect were earned not through words alone, but through actions, patience, and shared experiences. By the end of the week, Eli and Tahlequah had established a cautious routine. They exchanged brief conversations, mostly about survival in the land, but slowly, other topics began to appear. Eli told stories of his travels, of storms he had ridden through, and of the cattle he had lost and found. Tahlequah spoke of his people's history, of their traditions, and of the challenges they faced from outsiders. The two men did not yet call each other friends, but the first threads of understanding had begun to weave between them. As Eli prepared to leave the village and continue his search for the lost herd, he paused at the edge of the canyon and looked back. The sun was rising over the cliffs, casting golden light on the village and the hidden world it protected. He felt a strange sense of gratitude, not just for the help he had received, but for the reminder that even in the most rugged and unforgiving places, life could flourish and unexpected connections could form. Tahlequah watched him leave, his mind full of questions he did not yet have answers to. He understood that the cowboy's presence had already changed something within the village, and perhaps within himself. The canyon seemed quieter after Eli rode away, but the memory of the encounter lingered, like the distant echo of a waterfall that could be heard only in certain moments of silence. And so 2 men from different worlds had met at the edge of the desert, each carrying the weight of their own history, each learning that even strangers could bring unexpected lessons, and that the harsh land they shared could sometimes create bridges between hearts. Eli rode cautiously through the narrow canyon trail, his eyes scanning every rock and crevice. He had learned over the past week that the land was alive with secrets, and that even the smallest path could lead to wonders or danger. Alaqua had been watching him quietly, not far behind, curious about the cowboy's determination and calm presence. Though they had shared only brief conversations, there was an unspoken understanding growing between them. Both men recognized that the desert and the cliffs could be harsh, but they could also teach lessons about patience, observation, and trust. The morning air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and the distant aroma of desert herbs. Birds flew low across the cliffs, dipping and swooping as if guiding Eli along the hidden path. As he rode deeper into the canyon, Eli began to hear a faint sound, a rushing, powerful roar that seemed out of place in the otherwise quiet desert. His heart quickened with curiosity. He had learned to follow such sounds before. Sometimes they led to water sources, hidden streams, or safe places to rest. Other times they warned of danger, of rivers that could sweep a man away, or cliffs that could crumble without warning. "Do you hear that?" Eli asked, looking over his shoulder at Tahlequah. The young Apache warrior nodded. "It is the water," he said, his voice calm but carrying weight. "Not far from here is a place my people call the Hidden Waterfall. It is sacred. Few outsiders have seen it." Eli's curiosity grew even stronger. "Sacred? How so?" he asked, slowing Daisy's pace to match Tahlequah's walking stride. "The waterfall is part of the land that gives life," Tahlequah explained. "It is a place of reflection and spirit. Our people come here to think, to remember, and to honor what came before us. It is private, yet it is open to those who show respect." Eli nodded slowly, understanding that he was entering a place that held more than just natural beauty. It was a place of history, memory, and culture. He respected the unspoken warning and remained quiet, letting the sound of the water guide him. As they followed the narrow trail, Eli noticed the walls of the canyon changing. The jagged cliffs softened into smooth, worn rocks, and the path widened slightly, revealing patches of greenery that seemed almost impossible in such a dry land. Desert plants flourished near the water source, their leaves glistening with dew. Tiny wildflowers peeked through the cracks, their colors vibrant against the earthy tones of the canyon. Eli dismounted to examine a cluster of bright blue blossoms, amazed at how life could thrive in the harshest places.
This place.
"It's like another world," Eli whispered, more to himself than to Tahlequah. Tahlequah smiled faintly. "It is between worlds," he said. "The desert and the water, the land and the spirit. That is why it is important." The sound of the waterfall grew louder, more commanding, until finally Eli could see it through the trees and rocks. Water cascaded down a steep cliff, hitting the pool below with a force that sent up a misty spray. Rainbows shimmered in the sunlight, and the sound of rushing water echoed through the canyon walls like music. The sight took Eli's breath away. He had seen rivers and streams before, but nothing like this. Nothing that felt so alive, so powerful, and yet so peaceful at the same time. Tahlequah led Eli to a flat rock near the edge of the pool. "Sit here," he said. "You may rest, but do not disturb the water or the land around it. This place is sacred to my people." Eli dismounted carefully and stepped onto the rock. He looked around, trying to take in every detail. The way the sunlight caught the mist, the smooth stones worn by years of flowing water, the gentle ripple of the pool below. He could feel a sense of calm settle over him, a rare feeling he had not experienced in a long time. "This is incredible," he said softly. "I never imagined a place like this could exist, hidden in the desert." Tahlequah nodded. "Many forget that the land holds more than just survival. It holds lessons, memories, and connections. Those who come here with respect may learn something about themselves as well." For a long while, the 2 men sat in silence. The roar of the waterfall filled the canyon, drowning out all other sounds. Eli's mind wandered, thinking about his life on the trails. The endless searching, the loneliness, the constant struggle to survive. He realized that, in all his years of wandering, he had rarely taken time to pause and simply observe the world. The waterfall demanded attention, demanded presence. He felt a strange mix of humility and awe. Tahlequah broke the silence after some time. "You work hard, cowboy. You face danger and survive. But tell me, do you ever stop to see the life around you?" Ellie looked at him, considering the question. "Not often," he admitted. "Life on the trails is always moving. You look for water, for food, for shelter. You look for work. There is no time to stop. But here, it is different. I feel like I can breathe." The young warrior nodded, understanding. That is why the waterfall is sacred. It reminds us that life is not only about survival. It is also about understanding, about seeing what matters, about learning from the land and from each other. Eli began to talk more openly, sharing stories he had rarely told anyone. He spoke of harsh winters where snow buried his horses, of cattle he had lost to predators, and of nights spent alone under endless stars. Tahlequah listened carefully, asking questions, not out of curiosity alone, but out of a desire to understand the life of someone so different from himself. Then Tahlequah shared stories of his people, the struggles they had faced against outsiders, the importance of family and community, the lessons passed down from ancestors, and the respect they held for the land. As they spoke, Eli began to see more than just a young warrior before him. He saw a man shaped by his culture, his family, and his experiences. Tahlequah, too, began to see Eli differently. Not just as a stranger or a cowboy, but as someone who had also faced hardship and loneliness. Someone who had learned to survive in a world that was often unforgiving. After some time, Eli asked if he could explore the area around the waterfall. Tahlequah agreed, but insisted on accompanying him. They walked along the rocks, careful not to disturb the delicate plants and wildlife. Eli marveled at the tiny fish swimming in the clear pool, the birds nesting in the cliffs, and the insects buzzing over the flowers. Every detail seemed vibrant, alive, and meaningful. At one point, Eli noticed a small cave behind the waterfall. "What's in there?" he asked, pointing toward the dark opening. Tahlequah's eyes narrowed slightly. "It is a place of reflection," he said. "Some come here to pray, some to remember, some to think. Only those who are patient and respectful may enter." Eli nodded, understanding that some boundaries were not meant to be crossed without care. He realized that this waterfall was more than just a natural wonder. It was a living part of the Apache culture, a place where the land and the spirit intertwined. He felt honored to witness it, and grateful for the trust Tahlequah had shown him. As the afternoon sun began to lower, the canyon took on a golden glow. Eli and Tahlequah sat again on the flat rock, watching the water glisten in the sunlight. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and the sound of the waterfall seemed to carry lessons of its own. Lessons about patience, strength, and balance. "I have learned something today," Eli said quietly. "I thought the desert was only about surviving. But it's about living too. I see that now. And I think I am beginning to understand why this place is sacred." Tahlequah looked at him, a faint smile on his face. "Understanding comes slowly," he said. "You must listen to the land, to the water, and to the people. Only then can you see what is truly important." The two men remained there until the sun began to dip behind the cliffs, casting long shadows over the waterfall and the pool. Eli knew he would carry the memory of this place with him forever. The sound of rushing water, the vibrant life in the canyon, and the quiet, patient lessons of Tahlequah. He realized that even though they came from different worlds, they were connected by their respect for the land and the courage to face life honestly. As night approached, they made their way back to the edge of the canyon where the village awaited. Eli felt a sense of peace he had not known for years. He understood that his journey was not only about finding his herd, but also about discovering the deeper truths of the land and the people who lived on it. And he knew that this hidden waterfall, this magical place between worlds, had changed him in ways he could not yet fully understand. Tahlequah, walking beside him, thought about the cowboy and the lessons he seemed to carry. The young warrior felt a growing respect and curiosity. Sensing that their paths crossing was not merely chance, he wondered what the future might bring, knowing that the bond forming between them was fragile yet meaningful. By the time they reached the village, the first stars were shining in the desert sky. Eli settled near Daisy, feeling grateful for the trust he had been shown and the knowledge he had gained. He realized that sometimes the greatest discoveries were not in the land itself, but in the connections forged between people who dared to meet each other with respect, patience, and openness. The days after, Eli discovered the hidden waterfall passed quietly at first. The sun rose early and set late over the cliffs, painting the desert in golden light, and the village settled into its daily rhythms. Eli helped with small tasks, repairing fences, gathering water, and tending to the horses. Tahlequah watched him, observing the cowboy's careful movements and steady work ethic. There was still caution between them, but also a growing sense of trust. The waterfall had been a bridge between their worlds, a place where they had begun to understand one another. But the calm of the canyon could not last forever. One morning, as Eli led Daisy along a narrow trail near the village, he noticed unusual tracks in the sand, fresh horse tracks, fast-moving, not far from the settlement. His brow furrowed. He had learned to read the signs of movement in the desert, and these tracks suggested trouble. Someone had passed this way recently, moving quickly and with purpose. He followed the trail cautiously, knowing instinctively that danger might be near. Tahlequah approached from behind, his steps silent as the wind. "What do you see?" he asked softly. Eli pointed to the tracks. "Outlaws. Or rustlers. Could be both. They are moving fast, and they are armed. I've seen their kind before. Dangerous men who take what they want without care for life." Tahlequah's expression hardened. "Then we must prepare. My people will not allow harm to come to the village." His voice was steady, but there was tension beneath the surface. He had seen outsiders bring violence and destruction to his people before, and he knew that trust alone would not protect them now. Eli and Tahlequah returned to the village together. Tahlequah gathered the elders and the young warriors, explaining the potential threat. Eli, though still a stranger, was allowed to speak as well. He shared what he had learned from tracking, pointing out the direction of the approaching men and estimating their number. Though some villagers remained skeptical of him, most listened carefully. In a community built on caution and survival, knowledge was respected, even if it came from an outsider. "We must protect our homes, our families, and our horses," Tahlequah said firmly. "We cannot allow them to take what is ours." Eli nodded. "I know how to handle a herd, how to set traps, and how to move quietly. I can help guide you if you let me." The next few hours were spent preparing. The villagers reinforced fences, moved children and the elderly to safer areas, and placed lookouts on the cliffs above the canyon. Eli helped organize the positioning of riders and suggested ways to use the land to their advantage. Tahlequah coordinated the warriors, ensuring that everyone knew their roles. Despite the tension, there was a sense of teamwork forming, bridging the gap between the cowboy and the Apache. As the sun began to lower, a quiet stillness settled over the canyon. Every sound seemed amplified: the rustle of leaves, the call of a bird, the whisper of wind over rocks. Eli and Tahlequah rode along the edges of the village, scanning the horizon for movement. The outlaws were clever, moving through hidden paths and avoiding main trails, but Eli's eyes were sharp, and Tahlequah's knowledge of the land gave them an advantage. "Do you think we can stop them?" Eli asked quietly, keeping his voice low so the villagers wouldn't hear. Tahlequah studied the cliffs and the trails. "We can, but we must work together. They will not expect cooperation between our people. That is where our strength lies." Eli nodded. He had learned long ago that success in dangerous situations depended on trust and planning. He respected Tahlequah's knowledge of the land and his leadership, and he knew that his own experience with tracking and riding would complement the young warrior's skills. As night approached, the first signs of the outlaws became visible. Shadows moved along the far cliffs, men on horseback, carrying ropes and weapons. Their leader, a tall man with a rough face and a cruel stare, signaled to his companions, and they began moving toward the village with purpose. Eli felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He had faced danger before, but seeing it so close to innocent people always struck a different chord. Tahlequah guided Eli to a high vantage point where they could see the canyon entrance clearly. "We will strike only if necessary," he said. "Our goal is to protect the village, not to provoke them, unless they force our hand." Eli nodded, keeping his eyes on the approaching figures. He studied their movements, noting the spacing between them, the way they held their weapons, and the paths they seemed to prefer. Every detail mattered. The first skirmish came suddenly. One of the outlaws, perhaps testing the village's defenses, rode too close to the edge and was spotted by a lookout. A warning arrow flew, and the man swerved, narrowly avoiding it. The rest of the outlaws realized they had been noticed and began adjusting their approach. Dust rose in the canyon as horses galloped, and the sound of commands and shouts echoed off the cliffs. Eli felt his heart race, but he remained calm. He guided some of the riders to block the outlaws' path, using his knowledge of the terrain to anticipate their movements. Tahlequah moved with precision, leading warriors to strategic points where they could defend without exposing themselves to unnecessary danger. The clash continued for hours. Arrows and shouts filled the air. Horses galloped through narrow paths, and the villagers worked tirelessly to protect their homes. Eli and Tahlequah fought side by side, their skills complementing each other. Eli used his knowledge of the trails to anticipate enemy movements, while Tahlequah's understanding of the land allowed him to guide the warriors and set up defensive positions. At one point, Eli saw an outlaw aiming directly at Tahlequah. Without thinking, he threw himself in front of the warrior, taking the brunt of the danger. Tahlequah reacted instantly, drawing his bow and disarming the man before he could do any harm. Both men understood without words that their survival depended on trust and quick action. As the sun set behind the cliffs, the canyon was filled with the sounds of battle and the dust of the desert. Yet despite the chaos, Eli and Tahlequah maintained focus, their cooperation becoming seamless. They moved as a team, protecting the village and guiding the people to safety. Finally, after hours of tense confrontation, the outlaws realized they could not break the defenses. They retreated, disappearing into the shadows of the desert trails, leaving behind only the echoes of their aggression. Eli and Tahlequah watched them go, their bodies tired, but their spirits resolute. The villagers slowly emerged from their hiding places, relief washing over them. Families reunited, and the wounded were tended to with care. Though the battle had been hard, the village remained safe, and the bond between Eli and Tahlequah had grown stronger through shared struggle. That night, Eli and Tahlequah returned to the edge of the village, overlooking the canyon where the battle had taken place. The stars shone brightly above, casting a silver glow over the cliffs. Both men were silent, reflecting on the day's events. "You saved my life," Tahlequah said quietly, "and I would have done the same for you." Eli nodded, feeling a deep sense of respect for the young warrior. "We saved each other," he replied. "And we saved the village. That's what matters." They sat together in silence for a while, listening to the gentle sounds of the desert night. The wind rustled the leaves, and the distant echo of the waterfall reminded them of the hidden world they had discovered together. It was a place of life and learning, of trust and respect, and it had shaped their bond in ways that neither had expected. Eli realized that the desert was not just a place of survival, but a place where courage, patience, and trust could create connections stronger than any challenge. Tahlequah understood that outsiders were not always enemies, and that cooperation could bring strength and protection to those who needed it most. By dawn, both men were exhausted but resolute. The village had survived, the outlaws had been driven away, and a new respect had been formed between two men from different worlds. They knew that challenges would come again, but they also knew that together they could face whatever the desert and the people within it demanded. As Eli prepared to rest, he looked toward the horizon, thinking of the waterfall, the canyon, and the lessons he had learned. Life on the trails had taught him resilience, but the events of the past day had taught him something more. That courage and trust could unite even the most unlikely allies, and that the bonds formed in times of danger could last a lifetime. Tahlequah, lying nearby, thought of the cowboy as more than a stranger. He saw a man who shared his respect for life, his understanding of survival, and his willingness to act with integrity. The young warrior knew that their paths had crossed for a reason, and that the experiences they had shared would shape both their lives forever. The desert night was quiet now, filled only with the soft sounds of the canyon, the whispering wind, the distant call of a bird, and the faint echo of the waterfall. Two men, once from different worlds, had stood together in the face of danger, learning lessons about trust, courage, and friendship that would stay with them long after the desert had fallen silent. The morning after the outlaws had been driven off, the village was quiet but tense. Eli and Tahlequah rode along the cliffs, checking the trails and the paths the intruders had taken. They knew the threat had not vanished entirely. Outlaws like these rarely gave up so easily, and they would likely return with more men, more weapons, and more determination. The canyon, though beautiful and hidden, could not shield the villagers forever. Every shadow, every rustle of the wind, felt like a warning. Tahlequah's eyes were sharp, scanning every rock, every tree, every curve in the trail. "They will come back," he said quietly. "We cannot let our guard down. We must be ready, and we must fight together if they return." Eli nodded. He had faced dangerous men before, but the stakes felt different here. These were not strangers in some distant town. They were threatening a community that had taken him in, a place where he had found something more than just survival. He realized that protecting this village and Tahlequah had become a responsibility he could not ignore. Throughout the morning, the two men worked with the villagers to strengthen their defenses. Fences were reinforced with rocks and wood, narrow paths were blocked with obstacles, and the warriors practiced their positions, moving silently and with precision. Eli shared what he knew of the outlaws' habits, pointing out weak spots in the trails and suggesting ways to lure them into traps. "Tahlequah," directed the warriors, his voice firm and confident, making sure each person understood their role in the defense. By midday, a sense of quiet determination had settled over the village. The villagers worked tirelessly, their movements coordinated, their trust in each other, and in their two leaders growing stronger with every action.
Eli had never seen a community so unified, so resilient.
He marveled at the way every person knew their role, every movement purposeful, every glance meaningful. As the afternoon sun climbed high, the first signs of the outlaws appeared. Dust clouds rose in the distance, marking the approach of men on horseback. Their leader, the tall man with the cruel stare, rode at the front, signaling to his companions. Eli and Tahlequah exchanged a brief glance, a silent acknowledgement that the moment of confrontation had arrived. The outlaws charged with confidence, thinking the village was unprepared. They had underestimated both the terrain and the people who lived within it. Eli's heart pounded as he guided a group of riders to flank the approaching men, using the narrow trails to their advantage. Tahlequah moved with precision, leading warriors along hidden paths, positioning them where they could strike without exposing themselves. The first clash was sudden and intense. Arrows flew, horses whinnied in fear, and the shouts of men filled the canyon. Eli found himself side by side with Tahlequah, their movements coordinated without words. They had learned to read each other's intentions, anticipating actions and reacting quickly. Eli's experience with tracking and the terrain complemented Tahlequah's knowledge of the land and guerrilla tactics perfectly. In the chaos, Eli noticed an outlaw aiming directly at Tahlequah. Without hesitation, he rode between the two, deflecting the attack and drawing the man's attention. Tahlequah reacted immediately, using his bow with deadly accuracy to stop the threat. For a moment, time seemed to slow, and both men understood without speaking that their lives were intertwined. They had saved each other, and in doing so, had strengthened the bond forming between them. The battle raged throughout the canyon. Outlaws tried to break the village's defenses, but every move they made was met with careful strategy. Eli guided riders to block paths and herd enemies into traps, while Tahlequah's warriors struck from hidden positions, their arrows finding marks with precision. The villagers worked tirelessly, protecting homes and loved ones, driven by the need to survive and the courage inspired by their leaders. Eli found himself thinking about the waterfall, the place where he had first felt the calm and awe of the land. The memory of that serene, sacred place gave him strength. It reminded him that even amidst chaos and violence, there were moments of beauty and life worth protecting. He drew on that memory as he moved through the canyon, guiding villagers, blocking enemies, and ensuring that the young and old were safe. Hours passed like minutes. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the rocks and trails. The outlaws, though fierce and determined, were no match for the combined skills of Eli, Tahlequah, and the villagers. The battle tested their strength, patience, and courage, but it also revealed something deeper: the power of unity, the importance of trust, and the resilience of people who had learned to survive against all odds. At one point, Eli found himself separated from Tahlequah. He faced a group of outlaws advancing quickly, their eyes cruel, their movements aggressive. He held his ground, using the terrain to his advantage, dodging and redirecting them toward traps set by the villagers. The fight was exhausting, but Eli's focus never wavered. Every decision, every movement mattered. Tahlequah, seeing Eli in danger, reacted immediately. He drew his bow and moved swiftly along the rocks, striking at the outlaws and guiding them away from Eli. When they finally met again, both men were breathing heavily, their clothes dusty and torn, but their determination stronger than ever. "Are you all right?" Tahlequah asked, concern in his voice.
I am, Eli replied, gripping his reins tightly. We'll get through this together.
Their cooperation became seamless, each anticipating the other's moves, each anticipating the other without hesitation. The canyon, once a place of beauty and calm, had transformed into a battleground. But the bond between the cowboy and the warrior grew stronger with every passing moment. By sunset, the outlaws realized they could not overcome the village's defenses. Their numbers dwindled, their confidence shaken, and their leader finally called for retreat. Dust clouds rose as they disappeared into the desert trails, leaving behind only the echoes of their aggression. The battle was over, but the lessons learned would remain with the villagers, Eli, and Tahlequah forever. Families reunited, tending to minor injuries, comforting children, and assessing the damage. The air was filled with relief, gratitude, and the quiet pride of people who had faced danger and survived through courage and cooperation. Eli and Tahlequah, though exhausted, felt a deep sense of accomplishment. They had protected the village, guided their people, and strengthened the bond that had begun at the waterfall. That night, the two men returned to the edge of the canyon, overlooking the battlefield and the trails the outlaws had taken. The stars shone brightly above, and the desert night was calm once again. Eli sat quietly, reflecting on the day's events, on the courage of the villagers, and on the bond he had formed with Tahlequah.
You fought well,
Tahlequah said, breaking the silence. "Not just for yourself, but for others. That is why you are trusted here. We fought together, and it was your guidance, your understanding of the land, that made all the difference." For a long moment they sat in silence, the wind whispering through the canyon, and the distant sound of the waterfall echoing softly in their minds. The memory of that hidden sacred place reminded them of the balance between life and danger, peace and struggle, trust and vigilance. Eli realized that the battle had taught him more than just survival. It had shown him the strength of community, the importance of trust, and the courage that arises when people stand together. He understood that he had not only defended the village, but had also learned lessons that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Tahlequah, too, reflected on the day. He had seen many outsiders, many strangers, but few had proven themselves worthy of respect and trust. Eli had not only survived alongside him, but had acted with courage, skill, and integrity. The young warrior understood that their bond, formed through shared struggle and mutual respect, would endure beyond this battle. As dawn approached, the village settled into a quiet calm. The danger had passed, but the vigilance remained. Eli and Tahlequah knew that threats would come again, as they always did in the harsh desert, but they also knew that together they could face whatever challenges awaited. The canyon, the cliffs, and the hidden trails would always carry the memory of that battle, the courage, the fear, the trust, and the determination. And through it all, two men from different worlds had learned to fight side by side, to trust one another, and to protect what mattered most: Eli looked toward the waterfall, the place where their friendship had begun, and smiled faintly. He knew that no matter what came next, that hidden sacred place had given him more than peace. It had given him a connection, a purpose, and a reminder of the life he had chosen on the trails. Tahlequah stood beside him, looking at the horizon. He understood that the cowboy had become more than a visitor. He had become a partner, a friend, and a part of the village's story. And in the quiet desert night, with the stars above and the canyon below, both men knew that their bond, forged in trust and tested in battle, was unbreakable. The desert was harsh, the cliffs unforgiving, and the dangers ever present, but Eli and Tahlequah had faced them together. And as the first light of dawn touched the canyon walls, they prepared for whatever the world might bring next, confident in their strength, their courage, and the connection that had brought two worlds together. The morning after the battle, the canyon was quiet, bathed in soft golden light. Birds sang over the cliffs and the desert air felt calm, almost as if the land itself were breathing a sigh of relief. Eli and Tahlequah walked slowly toward the hidden waterfall, the place where their journey of trust and understanding had first begun. The roar of the water grew louder as they approached, and the mist rose from the pool below, sparkling in the morning sun like scattered diamonds. Eli dismounted from Daisy, letting her graze near the rocks. He stepped closer to the waterfall, feeling the cool spray on his face. "I never get tired of this place," he said softly. "It feels alive and safe, even after everything." Tahlequah nodded, standing beside him. "It is alive," he agreed. "It is a reminder that life continues even after hardship, that strength and peace can exist in the same place." They sat on the flat rocks near the pool, the roar of the waterfall filling the silence between them. Both men were tired, their bodies sore from the battle, but their spirits were stronger than ever. They had survived, they had protected the village, and they had done so together. And now, in the calm after the storm, they could finally reflect on what had happened. Eli thought about the past days, the danger, the fear, the uncertainty, and realized how much he had learned. He had always lived as a wanderer, a man alone on the trails, relying only on himself. But the events of the past week had taught him that life was not only about survival, it was also about trust, courage, and connection. He had found a friend in Tahlequah, a man from a different world, whose courage and wisdom had changed his life.
"I never expected to find something like this," Eli said, looking at the waterfall.
"Not just a place, but a person I can trust. A friend." Tahlequah studied him carefully, a small smile playing on his lips. "Friendship is not always easy," he said. "It requires trust, understanding, and action. We have shared fear, danger, and hard work. That is why we're friends now. That is why this place is important to both of us." Eli nodded, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. He remembered the first day he had stumbled into the village, uncertain and cautious, unsure if he would be welcomed or turned away. Now, he understood that every step, every act of patience and respect had led him to this moment. The waterfall had been a bridge, not only between the land and the spirit, but between two men from very different worlds. They stayed in silence for a long time, listening to the water, feeling the mist on their faces, and letting the calmness of the canyon settle over them. Eli thought about the villagers, the children, and the elders who had shown courage and determination during the battle. He realized that protecting them had given him a sense of purpose he had not known he was missing. Tahlequah had seen this as well. The young warrior had witnessed Eli's bravery and his willingness to act selflessly, and it had earned the respect not only of Tahlequah, but of the entire village. "I never thought I'd see someone like you, Eli," Tahlequah said quietly. "Someone who can be brave, careful, and honest all at once. You have proven yourself." Eli smiled faintly. "I could not have done it without you. You taught me about the land, about patience, and about understanding people. I think I have learned more in a few days with you than I have in years on the trail." Tahlequah laughed softly. "And I have learned from you as well. You have shown me that courage can come in many forms, that trust can be earned, and that friendship can cross worlds. For a while, they simply sat, letting the water speak its own language, feeling the bond between them deepen. The waterfall, once just a place of beauty, had become a symbol of everything they had shared: the trust, the courage, the battles, and the victories. It was a bridge between their lives, a reminder that connection and understanding could flourish even in the harshest of lands. Eli eventually stood and approached the edge of the pool, looking down at the clear water. The reflection of the sunlight danced on the surface, creating patterns that seemed almost alive. He felt a sense of peace, a rare feeling in his life, knowing that he had found something lasting. He had discovered not only a hidden place of beauty, but also a friendship that would endure beyond the desert and the battles they had faced. Tahlequah joined him, placing a hand lightly on Eli's shoulder. "The world is not always easy," he said, "but it is in moments like this that we see what truly matters. Friendship, respect, and courage are stronger than fear and violence. That is why the waterfall is sacred. It reminds us of what is important." Eli nodded. "I understand now, and I will carry this lesson with me wherever I go. The canyon, the village, and this waterfall. They are part of who I am now." The two men spent the rest of the day exploring the area around the waterfall, noticing details they had overlooked before. The way small fish darted through the pool, the delicate flowers clinging to rocks, the birds nesting in the cliffs. Each detail reminded them that life was not only about survival, but also about appreciating the world around them. They spoke of the future, sharing hopes and plans, imagining the journeys yet to come, and understanding that their friendship had opened doors to experiences neither had expected. As evening fell, Eli and Tahlequah returned to the village, walking slowly and quietly. The villagers welcomed them, grateful for their protection and inspired by their courage. There was a sense of celebration, not loud or boisterous, but warm and heartfelt. Families shared food, children laughed, and the elders smiled, knowing that their home had been defended by bravery and unity. Eli helped distribute food and water, spoke kindly to the villagers, and shared quiet words of encouragement. Tahlequah moved among his people, proud of the way they had worked together and grateful for Eli's presence. The bond between the cowboy and the warrior had become visible to all, a living example of how understanding and respect could overcome fear and mistrust. Later, when the village had settled for the night, Eli and Tahlequah returned to the waterfall. The moonlight reflected off the water, creating a silver glow that made the canyon feel almost magical. They sat once more on the flat rocks, letting the calmness of the night and the roar of the water fill their senses. "This place has changed me," Eli said softly, "not just because of the beauty, but because of everything that has happened here. The people, the battles, the trust. I feel like I understand life a little better now. And I have learned that the world is larger than the canyon, that trust can be found in unexpected places, and that courage is stronger when shared. We have both changed, and that is why this place will always matter to us." Eli looked at the waterfall, letting the sound of rushing water settle into his mind. "I will never forget this," he said. "The canyon, the village, the waterfall, and the friendship we have found here. No matter where I go, it will stay with me." Tahlequah smiled faintly. "And I will not forget you, Eli. You are part of our story now. And the waterfall will always remind us of the bond we share, the courage we found, and the strength of our friendship." The two men sat quietly for a long time, watching the moonlight dance on the water and listening to the soft sounds of the desert night. In that moment, they understood that the world was full of challenges, but also full of connections that could endure beyond time, danger, and distance. The waterfall, once hidden and sacred, had become a symbol of their journey, a bridge between two worlds and a reminder of the lessons they had learned together. Finally, Eli stood and looked at Tahlequah. "I will ride on again soon," he said, "but I will carry this place and everything we have shared with me. And we will always remember you. You are welcome here, in the canyon and among the people. The waterfall will remind us of courage, trust, and friendship, just as it will remind you." Eli mounted Daisy, giving one last glance at the waterfall. He felt a deep sense of gratitude and peace. The canyon, the hidden village, and the sacred pool had given him more than rest. They had given him a connection, a lesson in life, and a friend in a world where such things were rare. As he rode away, the sun began to rise over the cliffs, casting warm light across the canyon and the village below. Tahlequah watched him go, knowing that their paths might cross again, and that the bond forged in the desert, tested in danger, and strengthened by trust would endure beyond the harsh lands of the Southwest. The waterfall continued its steady roar, a timeless witness to life, courage, and friendship. It had bridged two worlds, the world of the wandering cowboy and the world of the Apache warrior, and in doing so, had created a story of understanding, bravery, and connection that would last a lifetime. Eli rode into the horizon, carrying the lessons of the waterfall with him. That trust could be earned, courage could be shared, and friendship could flourish even in the most unexpected places. And Tahlequah returned to his people, knowing that the cowboy had left a lasting mark, not only on the village, but on his heart. The canyon remained quiet, the stars above shimmering like scattered jewels, and the waterfall continued to flow, forever standing as a symbol of the bond between two men, two cultures, and two worlds that had met and learned to understand one another.